Okay, so welcome everybody. We are having our fifth tag meeting. I can't believe it's already been a year since we've really started this group, and how much we've accomplished in a year. We're back here in April again, and we've come so far. So I'll go over a little bit of the agenda today and what we're going to talk about today, and then we'll talk about upcoming opportunities for participation in the process. And then we'll just go over the schedule a little bit. And then later in the meeting, we can talk a little bit about the upcoming site visit. So Dahlia, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, here's the agenda. We're going to have John talk about the Van Cortlandt Lake Restoration Phase 1 update. We'll talk about the design phase 2 updates and the considerations that we've made since December, since we last spoke. We will talk about the CSX acquisition update, the Metro North easement update. We will talk a little bit about the Bronx Harlem River Greenway, and then we'll talk about our site visit, which is on Thursday at 9 a.m. and before we go into any questions that anybody might have. Next slide. So these are all the meetings that we've had, and we couldn't have gotten this far without all of you. So thank you for this, and we're going to keep going into this year, into the summer, and into the fall. So these are all our past meetings that we've had. We last left off with the conceptual design in December. This is our kind of like spring kickoff again, where we're going to have some design updates for you. We'll talk about the CSX corridor, where we're at with that, and then some of the other things coming up in May will include another presentation to CB7 regarding the ULURP process, another CB8 meeting where we're going to talk about the design that we're presenting to the PDC, and then we'll have a PDC preliminary design that we're sending over in August to the PDC. So the next slide, I think, talks about our overarching schedule. If you wouldn't mind, Dahlia, I don't know, it might be a little stuck on my computer. There we go. So we have advanced this through the conceptual design phase. We are now continuing on to the prelim design phase, which is what we're in now in spring 2023. And then we're still on track to start construction in 2025. And these are all based on DEC consent order timeframes.
There's some people in the waiting room that need to get in.
Oh, thanks, Karen. I'll admit them right now. Okay, they should be joining. Okay, so next slide, Dahlia. I think this just reiterates our project schedule. John can talk a little bit more next about where we're at with the lake restoration. We're looking to complete our design at the end of this year. And then again, we're on track for 2025 construction. And I think the next slide kicks it over to John, I believe. So John, take it away.
Thanks very much, Tara. Can folks hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just doing a double check. Good evening and welcome to the fifth tag meeting. This is just to go over a quick summary of the phase 1 work, which is the rehabilitation and invasive plant removal within the main lake itself. As part of the project, it's removing large stands of Phragmites and other invasive plants along the shoreline. Primarily the western shoreline. If you look on this graphic, that's a little cyan line on the left. That's the western shoreline. The eastern shoreline has more of the lines along the edge, and that's where most of the invasive vegetation is. So we're gonna focus there, and then that's also in removing the invasive vegetation. It's also then replanting it with native vegetation. Putting a wetland shelf into along the edge of the lake. Also, folks know that there's a lot of floating aquatics in the lake, and primarily water chestnut is one of the major culprits, along with other filamentous algae. that will also be controlled and removed. This contract is for a period of 2 years. So, if we don't get something, this year or the next, we have a little time to do a little more work on it. We have applied for our permits. We're still waiting for our DEC permit, but we do have our core permit. We do anticipate the DEC permit to be issued shortly. They just wanted a little more information on certain things. We do have the contractor selected. It was Stephen Dubner, Landscaping. We do expect this work to begin, this coming summer. And the total cost is about 1.5 million as it currently stands now. And that's it.
Thanks, John. I think I'm next to give an update on the status for the daylighting project. Just wanted to first recap a bit in terms of all the past coordination that we've been going through over the last few months. We initiated coordination with state DOT as well as city DOT lighting. We've continued our coordination with the DOT bikes unit and been coordinating on the Jerome Park Reservoir blow-off connection concept with DEC and gotten approval on that. We completed our tree survey for the CSX corridor. The tree survey for Van Cortlandt Park had been done last spring, and prepared that advanced conceptual design, which was presented to the TAG last December. Since then, we've been getting into the nitty-gritty on our design, from taking the advanced schematic design and using that off as a jumping off point. One of the key things that's been taking a lot of time is coordination of the designs of our weir structures within Van Cortlandt Park and the Hester and Piero's Mills Pond, with the various maintenance teams that will be involved, adding things like trash racks and grates that will streamline maintenance, but also be safe for the maintenance staff to walk on or clean easily, adding underflow baffles to help with debris capture. So getting into a lot of the nitty-gritty that's needed for that to advance. Likewise, coordination within DEP with the Bureau of Water Supply on the Jerome Park Reservoir blow-off connection. This is, as folks may remember from past meetings, there is a connection for the Jerome Park Reservoir blow-off connection that runs through the park through the daylighting project. And we're able to daylight some of that stream flow, some of that water from the Jerome Park Reservoir.
Can I come find you?
Sorry, if somebody can mute themselves in the background. So we're able to take some of that water from the Jerome Park Reservoir that currently gets discharged to the combined sewer and daylight that into the stream instead, into our new daylighted corridor. So really working through the details of how that can work with the operations staff from BWS, so to make sure that the structure is secure from a security standpoint, that it can be operated easily with their maintenance staff and their vehicles. Had been working through that. And then, as discussed, really taking this schematic, conceptual design and turning that into construction drawings. And so, that's just a level of detail that's required that takes a lot of time and coordination across all of our large design team. So just, for example, this is one location at Van Cortlandt Park South, south of the parking lot, and just how to take that area and turn that into, detailed design drawings. We've also introduced the project to the DEP stormwater permitting team. We have prepared the preliminary design that's currently under review by the various involved agencies, detailed the hydraulics memo that outlines the hydraulic features associated with this project, through that 75% through our preliminary design submittal. And also, considering how that the public art spaces can be finished in such a way to incorporate that future public art program. Some of the activities that are ongoing are agency reviews of the preliminary design, working with Metro North Railroad as well to review the preliminary design. We've been working to try and coordinate closely with the DOT bridge unit, advancing a lot of the really detailed landscape design now that all the hydraulic features are completed within the parks portion of the project. And that's being prepared in anticipation of the CB8 meeting next month, and then the PDC preliminary design submission. So you really, at the CB8 meeting is when we'll get into a lot of those really detailed design pieces. So you can look out for that next month. We are also developing a fact sheet and public outreach materials, and finishing up a draft EA that will be made publicly available once it's out of agency review. And just to note on the fact sheet, we are preparing a publicly facing fact sheet. We've updated the fact sheet for some internal reporting, but that will continue to be updated with latest graphics once we get through updating some of those graphics in anticipation of the CB8 and PDC submittals. And with that, I'll turn it over to Pinar to give an update on the CSX acquisition.
Good evening, everyone. You probably have heard this wonderful news. Early in this year, we indeed announced that January 18, 2022, we finalized the PSA, the purchase and sale agreement, signed both by the city and by the CSX. And that really sets this process of going through the abandonment in terms of the Surface Transportation Board approval. That's the process that CSX has to file for the property. So that is currently already filed by CSX. So we are on track. By May 11th, that's the next milestone coming up shortly, that we have to request that the STB, the Surface Transportation Board, issue a notice of interim trail use. That's the next step to be able to finalize this deal. And then we have up to a year after that request. Then the STB, the Surface Transportation Board, has to conduct its public process prior to issuing that notice of interim trail use. And as long as there are no objections, then STB can and should provide CSX petition for abandonment. So then after 90 days, that could come, and that will be the end of the process, and we can close after that process is complete. So as you see, we have a pretty strict deadline coming up, and our teams has been working very much in collaboration together, and our closing date cannot be later than August 2024 per the purchase and sale agreement that both parties agreed on. So that's the drop deadline that we have to close this property on or before the August 2024. And we are currently on track for accomplishing that date. The next one. So this is where we are. If you have any questions after we present, feel free to put your questions on the chat box, or we can visit after the presentation is over. So Also, we want to bring you a brief update on what we are up to with the Metro North property. You've been, you know that we've been really focusing on the CSX part, but now our attention is on the MTA, and we are in discussions with the Metro North. They did approve our proposed design conceptually, so that's great news. Their engineering department gave us the nod that we can proceed with this preliminary design stage. And currently the conversation is on the easement. We are going to need an easement, as you all know, on the Metro North property, so we can put our closed conduit next to the trail tracks that the Metro North owns. There's enough space, that's the good news. And we are proposing to install these 2.5 feet high by 6 feet wide concrete box. That's the closed circuit where we are going to be, most of the daylighting is going to happen as an open stream, but at some point we are going to go down below surface and go through the Metro North property, because these are very operational tracks. Therefore, we are getting the permission from Metro North to run this closed circuit. So the graphic on the left, the yellow line indicates our proposed Metro North right-of-way closed conduit. And that's where we are going to go all the way along and then connect downstream of that regulator and discharge through the existing CSO outfall. So this is our proposed option. Metro North agreed, but we are currently discussing with their real estate department in terms of the easement process. So if the Metro North grants the easement without a fee, without charging us, then we do not need a ULURP action. But since they haven't made that determination yet, we are putting our team together. You remember Terrell, Dana, and many others from DEP is working with the Metro North. So we are going to go as if we are going to be charged a fee and going through the ULURP process now, in case the Metro North decides us to charge us a fee, so that we are not losing any time building this project. So that effort is on a parallel track. That's why we will be visiting CB7 in May to provide an update on this part of the project, and also give a heads up on this upcoming ULURP process, which we have a very tight schedule on the next slide. Dalia. So this is our ULURP schedule. We had a call with DCP last winter to get their input on, how soon we can get the ULURP certification, and they gave us some dates that we can try for. So these dates, as you see, are pretty soon. Spring 2023, we are going to be going for a pre-application statement for review, and then late spring, early summer, land use application to DCP. Then in the spring, summer of this year, hoping DCP is going to review this land use application, and then we are going to complete the sticker. And by September of this year, we are hoping the ULURP certification to happen. So we are proposing and walking through these steps with the DCP, and you'll be hearing more from us in the upcoming meeting in May with the Community Board 7. So again, any questions, feel free to chime in. I think this is it for me, and then I'm going to transfer it to Margot from DOT to talk about the Harlem Greenway.
Thanks, Pinar. Yes, so I recognize, sorry, let me introduce myself really quickly. I'm Margot Grew, and I'm an assistant director in the DOT bicycle unit, and I focus specifically on greenways. And I recognize a few of you from attending our workshops last week. So sorry that you'll have to hear this spiel again, but I promise this is the short version. Before I move on to my presentation, just because this is a Tibbetts focused audience, I'll just preface this by saying that we consider the Tibbetts project to be effectively part of our Harlem River Greenway that I'm going to talk about in a moment. But the limits of our study are more expansive, and we're also interested in what we can do in the short term too, like before any capital construction projects come online. So with that, if you could jump to the next slide. This Greenway planning effort that I'm spearheading is a joint effort with a lot of different agencies here at DOT. We are leading it as the city's transportation agency. We're also joined by our colleagues at the Parks Department. Mitchell and I talk seemingly every day, and we've been coordinating with DEP and Parks, particularly on the Tibbetts project. In addition, our partners at EDC are involved bringing their expertise in waterfront development and in areas where greenways can have catalytic economic effects. And then you should be familiar with some of these community partners, the Harlem River Working Group, the New York, New Jersey Harbor and Estuary Program, the Urban Waters Federal Partnership, and BCEQ have all been so helpful to us throughout this planning process. And I'll just mention that we're working with a consultant team who is helping us to develop the implementation plan that I'll talk more about in a bit. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the many Bronx communities around the Harlem River have been advocating for a waterfront greenway for quite a long time, and we are happy that they have been, because this implementation planning process is the direct result of that advocacy. And the idea is to provide a nearly 7-mile continuous greenway connection all the way from Van Cortlandt Park down alongside the Harlem River to Randall's Island. And we are interested both in that main greenway corridor and in connection points that will allow pedestrians and cyclists to more easily get to the water. It is, oh, sorry, before I move on, I just wanted to emphasize that our intention with this planning process is for it to be very community driven. We just hosted 2 nights of workshops last week, and later on I'll tell you a little bit more about how you can remain engaged. Next slide, please. Thank you. Lots of people have different ideas in their mind when they think of what is a greenway. Here at DOT, we're particularly focused on the transportation utility of greenways. And we think that greenways are useful in their continuity. So the continuous aspect is key, and that's why we're looking at the end goal is to have a continuous 7-mile greenway along the Harlem River in the Bronx. The diagram on the right here is illustrating a concept of the dark green line shows what we might call the overall greenway, or the greenway corridor, which we, for the sake of implementation and to adapt to the changes in the street network, will need to be broken up into bite-sized pieces or greenway segments. And then we're also equally interested in what we call greenway connectors, and these are typically local streets that connect from the main greenway corridor into the rest of the network, bringing people to the greenway, the main greenway corridor, in a safe, interconnected fashion. And greenways very often follow natural and man-made linear spaces, what you might hear referred to as an edge condition, meaning that we can sort of bypass intersections, which, you know, make the design more difficult. So in this case, the intention is for us to connect, to take advantage of the natural edge condition formed by the Harlem River. Next slide. The benefits of greenways are, I think, innumerable, but to name a few, primarily our focus at DOT is transportation, getting you from A to B. So that's both for utilitarian transportation, for commuting purposes, and also for fun, to see your friends, for recreation, etc. And something that I like about greenways is the opportunity for active travel, biking and walking, which we know is proven to improve health outcomes. Moreover, greenways encourage sustainable modes of transportation and can bring people together through recreation and leisure. With past greenway plans that we've developed in other areas of the city, we've noticed significant benefits to the local economy too. And importantly, greenways also connect people to nature, the greenery around them, and in this case, to the waterfront. Next slide. So some of our project goals, just to reiterate, is again the comprehensive plan for the continuous and safe and accessible path. We're really eager to work with community members and hear your ideas. And something I'll touch on in just a minute is, what can we do in the short term? What can we do now outside of a capital construction process to improve conditions for biking and walking along the Greenway study area? Next slide. The overall project's schedule, we in this month, in April 2023, we are finishing up our first series of public workshops, which are focused on gathering info about the existing conditions and ongoing projects that we know about in the area, sort of getting an inventory of what's there and what's in the pipeline. Then over the summer, we're going to be working diligently with our consultant team to take all of that feedback that we've been gathering and identify potential project routes and specific ideas for individual segments and connectors. Then we'll be coming back in the fall to present some of those more specific ideas, which we will then be wrapping into a comprehensive planning document. I do just want to say that throughout this process, as opportunities arise to implement projects quickly, we're not going to wait. We will seize those opportunities whenever we can. Next slide. And to that point, I did want to explain a little bit about DOT's value as an operational agency, the picture on the top there that you see is illustrative of the sort of quick win project that we can do with our in-house capacity. We refer to them as street improvement projects or SIPs, but the idea is that we can, in some cases, dramatically reconfigure the street in the near term using materials that we have on hand, namely paint, vertical delineators, some limited concrete work, but we can do that in a few years to get the Greenway process moving. And then the second half of the slide are capital projects, which are longer term street reconstruction efforts. And many of our sort of short-term projects sort of grow up to become capital projects. But these sorts of things take several years. So in the near term, we're focused on what we can do right now. Next slide. So to orient you to our study area, the area we've broken up the 7 mile geography into 3 sections to make it a bit more manageable. The area most relevant to you all for this Tibbetts advisory group is the northernmost section between Van Cortlandt Park and the University Heights Bridge. And we had the workshop for that, area last week. Similarly, we already had the workshop for the University Heights Bridge to the Macomb Bridge area. But if you are interested in this process and you know that third area from the Macomb Bridge to Randall's Island, I would encourage you to join us this Wednesday for a workshop on that area and what the Greenway can look like through that location. Next slide. Oops, I just sort of stole my thunder there. And for those of you who have additional ideas but weren't able to make it to the workshops or are only just hearing about it now, I would encourage you to submit any comments, ideas, suggestions, complaints, etc. In our online feedback portal. And I'll drop a link into the chat right now. I think that's it. Thank you so much for giving me the time.
I think we are going to go to Rupesh next.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rupesh Joshi. I'm the Managing Director of Green Infrastructure for Design and Construction for DEP. I've been working with the design team. Amy Mosney is the DEP project manager. She couldn't be here today, but she will be there along with many of us for the site visit on Thursday. But I'll quickly go through the site visit and the paths that we're taking. We're meeting at Vervelen Place. We'll give you the exact address on the next slide. Again, on the CSX property, there is a gate for us to enter through. We'll first head south from Vervelen Place up to the end of the CSX property on 230th Street. That way we'll get to take a look at the MTA property as well. And then we'll head back going northwards onto the CSX property. And then we can discuss what the site looks like. You'll be able to see all of the issues at the site, like buildings and buildings with low windows. Also at the site, we could talk about, where we would have filling or excavating, and then some of the issues with regards to the site as well. Again, in the next few slides, we can also see what's being proposed. Dahlia, next slide. So on Thursday, we'll meet at 9 a.m. on Vervelen Place between 230th Street and 231st Street. Like I said, there is an entrance for us to get onto CSX property. If you're taking the train station is close by. If you take the number 1 train, if you are taking the car, there is a parking garage that you could put the address on. And although the address is 230th Street, if you just walk over to Verbena Place, there is an entrance to the parking place as well on the other side. So we'll meet at 9 a.m. there, and then we can all head down to 230th Street to see the MTA property. Next slide. So this is the Metro North area. This is where the closed conduit is going to go. So we won't be walking this side, but from 230th Street, we will be able to see this, and I can show you what the site looks like. But basically, it is pretty narrow on MTA property, and Pinar mentioned all of the easements that we're working on. Again, down towards the end near Harlem River, that is where there is a larger area where we may be able to do some staging, but that is where the overall connection is going to take place as well. Next. So this is what the MTA, the Metro North site looks like. The bottom left is probably what we'll see from 230th Street. On the left-hand side, underneath that embankment is where the closed conduit is going to go. But again, the first 2 photographs, and actually the first 3, they actually show the crossing on Metro North property. But most of it is going to be the areas that we'll be able to see is going to look like photographs down at the bottom. Again, just a narrow pathway. Next slide. So from 230th Street, after observing the Metro North area, we'll walk up. Again, anyone that might be late will be able to probably see them as we go up to 231st Street. Next slide. From 230th Street, if we're looking north, this is what we'll be able to see. What's being proposed is the walkway. It's an elevated walkway, and you'll be able to see, it's because we're going to put a channel there. There isn't that much space just for the pathway, so that's why it's being elevated, and you can see the narrowness of the area. Next. Again, just the picture that I showed you earlier, but this is just a rendering of it. Again, we're still working through the details, but more or less, if we put a rendering, it's going to look like this. Next slide. So as we walk up from 231st to 233rd Street, we can see the exact location of where the channel, it changes to a closed conduit. So, label number 3, that's where we have this intake structure, and that's where the water, will go into a closed conduit. It is taking place on CSX property. And, one of the reasons for doing that is also because the buildings in that area, they really have low windows. So, we couldn't put an open channel there. Next slide. But again, from 234th Street, if you look north, this is what the pathway is going to look like. Next slide. And we'll walk up from 234th Street up to 236th Street. Again, we'll go over the different issues. The pathway sort of changes. We'll talk about where we'll excavate, where we'll have fill, and we'll be able to look at the issues with the buildings as well. And we have, again, been talking to some of the property owners, and we're also working on different easements, and we'll talk about that during the field visit. Next slide. Again, as Pinar mentioned earlier, and Dahlia mentioned as well, we're working through the design. And again, these are what our design drawing looks like. Next slide. And we'll probably stop at 230th Street. It does go a little further, but as we walk there, again, if you could bring your boots, it is grassland, but it does get mucky, so we'll stop around this site. Next slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Rupesh. Okay, so now we can open up to questions. If anybody has a question, I see, I think David was the first person to raise your hand if you want to start.
Yes, thank you. The key question I wanted to check with Margot was the intent of the Van Cortlandt Park to University Heights. That I don't think you're that far in the design. You haven't really defined it well, but is the intent to make it one contiguous path from Van Cortlandt to the University Heights Bridge along this greenway? I know there are many miles to go to get there, but figuratively.
Yes, in fact, I think I mentioned the overall goal is to connect all the way from Van Cortlandt Park to Randall's Island. Now, what I will temper that by saying the goal is always waterfront adjacent path. That may not always be possible depending on the adjacent land uses and land ownership. We can only control what we can control. So where a directly waterfront greenway is not feasible, we'll need to look towards more upland or inland routes.
All right, because the key thing is 230th Street down to where it will dump out into the water. That's going to be really hard because Metro North doesn't want to budge on that. So that's why I'm bringing up. But I know you've got lots of things to negotiate over time.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Next up, I see Laura has her hand raised.
Okay, hi.
Hey, Laura.
You've made amazing progress since your last report. Did I miss something? Discussion of the access points that you're using to access to Broadway? Have you, there were several choices last time and you were narrowing that down. What is your thinking now?
I'm not sure who wants to jump in on that.
I think I can take that.
Perfect.
So here, I will go back here at the meeting. Sorry, I think one more slide. Yes, so at the advanced schematic design meeting last December, this had been the recommendation, and that's what we are going to be moving forward with. Access points at West 230th Street, Verveulen Place, to West 233rd Street, West 239th Street, and Van Cortlandt Park South, through the park, that is. And then also we were going to be exploring through the private property and access through the private property at West 236th Street, through the parking lot of the Riverside Crossing facility. And Parks has been negotiating with the property owner, and it does look like that easement is going to move forward. So our design is taking that into consideration and at grade, access, trying to incorporate an at grade access. But those are the designs, the options that have been presented at that December meeting, and that's what we are moving forward with in the design.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob Bender, did you have a question?
I do have a question. Thank you. Back in the Metro North slides, there was some slide that said that the conduit would cross the Metro North rail yard at West 193rd Street, but would not cross the Hudson Line tracks of Metro North. But the brook itself is going into the Harlem River. And I don't understand how it's getting into the Harlem River without going under the Metro North Hudson Line tracks. So either I'm misunderstanding something or the slide wasn't clear.
I can answer that.
Okay. Cindy, if you wanted to answer that?
Yeah. So the connection will be, there's an existing regulator there, and our pipe will connect downstream of the tide gates. and utilize the outfall that already exists crossing the Metro North tracks. So as you can see right on the slide, the yellow line kind of joins just downstream of the regulator, and then the white line shows you the existing outfall pipe that discharges into the Harlem River. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's exactly what I had always understood. So I don't know what that, there was a different slide that said something about 193rd Street rail yards, wherever that is. But you've answered the question and clarified it, which is all I cared about. I just wanted to mention one other thing. I wanted to remind everybody, I know this is a TAG meeting. The question of the Harlem River Greenway has come up. We're also working on a Hudson River Greenway, and the study area goes down to Spuyten Duyvil, and I hope we can extend that so that it will make the connection approximately 1 mile farther south to this exact location, where we can connect to the Harlem River Greenway and the access point to Van Cortlandt Park. So I just want to remind everybody there's another greenway in the Bronx that we're working on. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I see Chauncey has your hand up.
Yeah, similarly on this point, actually, perfect slide to have here. I just want to raise, especially since we have Margot and the DOT on the line. Obviously, I think it's been clear since the very beginning that the community really wants to make sure this greenway connection continues south, 230th to 225th Street, where we have a much safer connection, and have already had some conversations with the Target property and about making a direct connection to the Harlem River waterfront. So, it's just would make this a much safer connection than 230th Street to end this property as a bicyclist and someone who uses this area. So just, if we have to go to ULURP with Metro North to get that conduit, it's not a terrible thing because, it'll continue us to have pressure on Metro North, who's currently saying this property is needing to be used to manage all the trash from the Grand Central Madison project. So we need to manage trash from Connecticut, Long Island, and upstate New York in this section here that we're looking at, and that's why they don't want to follow through with original agreements from the over 10 years ago to transfer this property over to Parks to complete the Greenway, which was the original ULURP plans from many. So love to see that, in the notes and see what DOT can do, because they have said that they've not heard from DOT about any interest in this property from 230th to 225th Street for the.
Thanks, Chauncey. Next person is Robert Pirani.
Hi, everybody. Rob Pirani with the New York, New Jersey Harbor and Estuary Program and the Urban Waters Federal Partnership. I just wanted to make a quick announcement. I'm going to drop a link in the chat, but in collaboration with the Harlem River Working Group and New York City DOT and other partners, we just released an RFP for small grants to support community programs connected with the Harlem River Greenway. The idea is to provide some support for nonprofits, community-based groups who are interested in running public programs along the river, maybe in one of our great parks, or bringing people down to the river on, walking or bicycling. So anyway, the link is there in the chat. The letters of inquiry are due May 15th. Just wanted to make sure to get the word out about those. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll put my email in the chat right now as well.
Thanks, Rob. Next up, Deb Travis.
Hey there. Thank you for calling on me, and thank you for this presentation. It's great to kind of begin to see this whole project take shape. I wanted to, Bob Venusi asked me to make sure that you noted his question in the chat about kind of where the targeted real endpoint is. And I think that that's kind of also connecting to what Chauncey is saying about West 225th Street being kind of our preferred endpoint. For a 2-3 reasons. One, because of the easy access to the Broadway Bridge. One, because of the safer connection through the Target kind of parking lot area. And 3, finally, the Kingsbridge Road. It's just like a really nice, easy east-west connection for us. So that's just a much more central connection. Also wanted to amplify what Bob was saying about the Hudson River Greenway and just kind of planning for that and for connections to that. But we definitely don't want to leave that behind. And then my question was really one about sound and the Major Deegan. I guess I have 2 questions. One is sound in the Major Deegan. It seems like you've gone kind of high on this kind of canopy walk. What is to prevent, like when a big truck comes by, like it just feeling like a big truck went by, 10 feet away. And then the other thing is, can you just talk a little bit more about the public art component and who would be administering that? Is that going to be kind of through Van Cortlandt Park and the parks process for temporary art? Sorry, there's like 4 things there, but that's all I got, I swear.
I think I can take the height of the elevated pathway. The rendering that was shown was actually the off-ramp from, sorry, not the off-ramp, but the ramp down from 230th Street. So that just that specific location in terms of how it was adjacent to that existing building, generally it is only going to be a couple feet off of the water and will be lower. And so that's less of a issue.
Okay.
And I'd say, also can continue to petition DOT as well for a sound study.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really important for people to feel like they really want to use it. I think if you go over to the walkway that's actually existing now in Van Cortlandt Park, kind of just north of the park's golf house, there's a place there where you can have the privilege of walking along the Major Deegan at a close proximity, and it's not particularly pleasant. So we definitely want to kind of learn from those lessons for sure.
Sorry, and that was one of the questions.
Deb, do you mind asking the rest of your questions again?
Oh my God, you have to remember them, man. So what was it? What was the other one? It was noise.
I know you were asking about public art, which I can jump in and answer, but was that the
was really
last
the
one?
other thing. Everything else was just amplifying 225th and the Hudson River Greenway. But I also wanted to just know who's going to be responsible for curating the art and approvals for the art. Is it just through Van Cortlandt Park Alliance? How's that going to work? And is there any % for art funding?
So there's no % for art tied to this project because of the contract mechanism used for DEP's work with the consent orders for DEC. But the spaces that are being designed to accommodate art installations in the future along the project, those would be managed by parks the way we do other art installations throughout the city. So we have a process that runs through our Arts and Antiquities Division and Marketing and Special Events.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Yeah, I think
thanks,
that
Deb.
in the CBA presentation, right, Mitchell, that we are going to be showing those locations allocated for the feature art. So more details are going to come at the CBA presentation.
Thank you, everybody. Bob Finuzzi, are you there? Are you with us? Did you have to run out? I don't know.
No, I'm here. Thank
You're
you very
here.
much,
Hi,
Sarah.
Bob.
How are you?
Good.
So, good. I had a question in the chat, which was more engineering at 230th Street. But before you answer that, I just wanted to let you know of an environment committee meeting that we had last week with MTA, in which Community Board 8's Environment Committee really addressed this issue of the currently fallow land that you're talking about and the environmental justice implications of moving the region's garbage into Marble Hill. So we just wanted you to know there's a recording of the meeting, but also that we're really, for all the reasons that Chauncey, Deb, and others have said, we're really committed to getting MTA to work with the city. So it's let us be your advocates for that. It would just make life better for so many reasons, as you say. So given, and we will send that along to you. But the meeting's recorded. But I did want to talk about the cross-section slide where we saw that man or woman or person on top of a at 230th Street. And where do they go? Let's say, I know you have a lot of scenarios you have to keep in mind right now, but how does that person get down from the Greenway currently? Do you have that planned yet? And where do they end up?
So here's a plan view, and the cross section was roughly, somewhere in this area.
Yeah.
So there's going to be an entrance at 230th Street, and that's for people to be able to continue and go north, just as an option other than Verveulen Place for folks to.
Oh, so, okay. So there will be two entrances. There'll be a Verveulen entrance and there will be a 230th Street entrance?
Yes.
Okay. And will you can do that at 230th, because before you were talking about too much of the acreage being used for stairways and handicap accessibility to allow the fit within the width. So that's good news. So you actually have a route, an exit ramp or a stairway down from 230th.
It is going to be a ramp or path. It's not even officially a ramp, but because we're under 5%.
Okay. All right. Great. That's what I want to know. But just want you to know about MTA, and we are really want them to be part of planning, as they've done throughout their Empire State planning process in New York State. So thanks for everything you're doing here. We look forward to seeing you next month at the community board too. Thanks.
That's awesome. I mean, I just want to clarify, Rob, you probably know, but there is no daylighting happening there. That's how he managed to do this ramp. Because we are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because you're stopping short. Oh, that's right. Yes, because you're stopping at 232nd now.
Exactly.
So you.
Right.
Oh,
now
that's the trade-off.
To play. Yep, that's the trade-off.
Oh, okay, excellent. That explains it. Okay, thank you, Pinar. That explains it.
Thanks, Bob. Camelia.
Yes, thank you. Just to reassert for the third time what was said, I participated in the Harlem Greenway workshop 2 weeks ago, and I'm also chair of CB8 ENS, and we had, as Robert mentioned, we had Andrew Buder from Metro North last week, and two things come across very clearly. In the meetings 2 weeks ago, DOT almost gave up from the first meeting on building up on the interagency sort of work with Metro North, and then in the meeting last week, Metro North said basically, well, DOT didn't even bother to ask us yet. So I'm a little bit concerned there whether we are, putting our best foot forward here to make this as an example of interagency cooperation, or because it seems to me like everybody's like, oh, we know that part is hard. Let's kind of trying to avoid it. And if we don't have waterfront access, let's go on Bailey, or let's go, I don't know. They were mentioning like Fordham and other like things that are not really exactly along the Harlem River. But that one part. Part two, specifically on the Tibbetts part, I mean, I keep asking this question over and over again because personally I manage a commercial corridor and this is parallel to Broadway. So two issues are there. How the trash will be managed, and this may be early, I know, but I keep answering because I want to hear what the long-term plan. And two, graffiti. I got stuck on the Deegan a couple of weeks ago, and I can't wait to walk along with you guys. I mean, it's incredible the amount of graffiti, and this is on private walls, right? Like on the facing the CSX property. Some of them are really high up. So I kind of wonder, once all the engineering, the hydraulics, the strictly technical part, how will that be managed? And in the long term, same question as for trash, sort of when DEP finishes the technical setup, right? Will parks have a budget to handle the management, the day-to-day trash, graffiti, and all the other things that come with public use? This is sort of my long-term question. I'm really concerned that this project will become a victim of its own success, because it will be such an amazing thing that you know, these things have to be asked early and planned early. Thank you.
Mitch, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so Camelia, Parks will be managing trash and graffiti to the extent that there's graffiti on the park's owned structures in the corridor. As far as how that's going to happen, we're working very closely with DEP and with the designers to make sure that the greenway will allow for our maintenance vehicles access and loading weight, so that way they'll be able to quickly get to those trash points. There is no dedicated special like M&O maintenance and operations budget for this project. It will be a part of regular Bronx operations. So yeah, like victim of unsuccess, we hope it's really successful, and we hope that shows that there's a lot of need here, and then we would be able to allocate additional resources. But in general, it's going to be managed and maintained just like Van Cortlandt Park, like any other park space.
Right. I'm sorry to be insisting, but the strictly on the walls of the private properties immediately adjacent to the grasses section. So those will not be cleaned, let's say, to begin with. They will stay as it is, which is technically responsibility of the private property owners, I know, but I'm just asking. And second, I want to re-ask again Deb's question, because there was in some previous presentation, maybe only on a certain section, a possibility of elevating the separating wall to the Deegan. Is that still something, or that was kind of for a particular section, or both in terms of noise, but frankly in terms of safety also?
So as far as the graffiti, I don't think we have the answer just yet to make sure to know whether, you know, existing graffiti will be removed before our project goes into construction. That is not something that is necessarily, like you mentioned, the responsibility of parks or DEP. It's private property, you know, maintenance of their own property. But we are in discussions with some property owners about graffiti along the back wall before the project happens. Who knows? You know, I think we'll keep those discussions up. But the treatment along the walls, Dahlia, hop in if there's areas where this isn't exactly the case, but wherever there is exposed blank wall next to the greenway, the intention is to have pretty dense and tall plantings in those areas to block that wall, so it's not a magnet for new graffiti.
Correct. Yeah, it really, you know, other treatments, especially on private property, were somewhat limited, but you know, our idea is that from a long-term perspective, vegetation is going to be the best way to help prevent this.
And then Dahlia, can I tap you to answer the question about the barrier between the Deegan? As Camelia, you're saying that your question was whether it is being raised at all. Is that right?
There is going to be a wall between the Deegan and the corridor where needed to, there will be a wall. In some cases, it's going to extend higher than the existing wall along the Deegan. Other places it won't, you know, depending on what the edge condition on the Deegan is. That is generally going to be higher than the pathway, but not necessarily up to, say, head height of somebody on the pathway.
Okay, I see Karen also has her hand up.
Yes, this is a beautiful project. Thank you very much. I think you answered many of our questions, if not all. I do have 2 points. One on the sound barrier question that Camelia just raised. So we do have a design for using natural green wall that Paul Mankiewicz put together. I could send that to whoever wants to look at it. They do it apparently all over California. That doesn't mean it's necessarily good, but it also will just add a little extra more green. It'll cut down on the sound. I just don't know if it's like where it's going to get the water to keep the green. Is that like going to be on the DOT side, or is that going to be coming off of the water feature? And I almost think it's like a DOT project for the Major Deegan, for that area of the Major Deegan that abuts it. So I'm just throwing it out that there is a solution, and maybe it needs to be coordinated with the outside agency that's not sitting in the room now. And then my second thing is that, you know, I know that you have your permits out to get your stormwater permits out, but in the stormwater plan, management plan, it's required to have a maintenance and operation procedure written down. And so that people know exactly what so like if you buy a vacuum cleaner, you need the directions on how to clean it and take care of it. It's something that's required in the stormwater rules. And so even though the Parks Department says they don't have it allocated, they'll have to put it in if they're going to be running this piece of land, or, you know, I guess they will be because it's going to be parks, and there's no other project owner, that they'll have to have an M&O put out so that we could look at it and see exactly how it will be maintained. Especially some of the things that everybody says, oh, don't worry, we'll take care of it. And just remember the 4 things along the Major Deegan that now push into Van Cortlandt Lake, and how nobody for 20 years figured out how to open or where the key was. So we need to know that there's going to be a plan available for the public to actually look at. Thank you all very much. Thank you for this.
Thanks, Karen. David, did you have another question?
Well, yeah, not quite a question, but 2 sets of conflicting points. I'm a cyclist and I love seeing those long straightaways, but with our experience of electric bikes, etc., in Van Cortlandt Park, that's been a real problem. So it's something to think about in your design, how to break that up so it doesn't become inviting, become a speedway, and also the daylit part below, that it doesn't become a speedway. As much as I like long straight sections for my biking. The other is about the sound barrier to the Deegan. Yeah, there's a conflict there too, because I like the idea of not having all the noise and smog or whatever coming off the Deegan onto the path, the greenway. But there is also something nice about the idea of trucks and cars seeing that you can bike rather than be stuck there for 40 minutes in traffic. So I encourage you to check out Starro Drive and Memorial Drive on either side of the Charles River in Boston, because they are bike pathways that are sandwiched in between major highways. And that might give you some ideas of how to address those issues. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Deb, did you have another question?
Yeah, I just had one more question. Was one on the wall height. I thank you, David, for the suggestions of other places where they've kind of done this to get ideas of how this could work. I wanted to just raise the issue of just the standing water on the Deegan and plus traffic. So it would be, I think, ideal if the wall was high enough that, like, if you're on this pathway, you don't have to worry that a car is about to zip down the Deegan and just shower you with water, because you don't have a lot of places to go to hide from, so just to have the wall just be high enough that you're not going to get anything. You don't have to worry about the Deegan and getting sprayed. And then the one question that I just wanted to ask that has happened since we last met, which was that the Army Corps of Engineers a plan came out and we all commented on it. And one of the things that we were discussing in our committee was our question about, we generally believe that there'll be more water coming up the Harlem River, and this outfall is kind of right at the ground zero, for lack of a better word. How will during hurricanes, during periods where there's a lot of water coming up the Harlem, or storm surges and such, how is this intended to work? Will water be able to flow back up, and will this flood, or is it kind of the CSO just shuts down and doesn't let anything go in or out? Like, how's the intended flow supposed to be?
There is a tide gate on the structure to prevent some water from when the high tide in the Harlem River is higher than the basically the inner top of the pipe, or the hydraulic grade line within the, the corridor. But as long as there's positive, the hydraulic grade line within the pipe is higher than the tide, it should still continue to push some water out. So, we have done analysis on, basically during a design storm, how high the water will get within the corridor, and design for a freeboard within the corridor. But there are extreme event conditions where it's potentially going to overtop the banks, and there is space there for that. Obviously, it will impact the the bike surface, the greenway surface at that point, but not under typical conditions, right?
So then I guess what I'm hearing you say is that if there is a storm surge or like, another Hurricane Sandy, that this is designed so it wouldn't be usable on that day, but that it's resilient, that it could absorb whatever water, deal with whatever water, it'll be wet, but that it can handle it, and then the water will drain out as the water goes back out.
Exactly. All the hardscape surfaces within the corridor drain back to the screen corridor as much as possible. And in the low-lying area, we're designed with basically capacity for a 100-year rain event within the low-lying area that can't get into the pipe, so that there's space, for that water to be stored.
So it's designed for a 100-year storm.
I do want to just correct that the conveyance is designed for a 5-year storm, which meets the DEP standards. The local drainage that might just fall within the corridor, there is absorptive capacity to handle greater than that. But if it is a area-wide storm where you're getting rainfall like a 50 or 100-year rainfall all over the place, well, then there are bigger issues than just this project. I mean, as long as Van Cortlandt Lake stays intact and doesn't overtop, we have ample capacity within the daylighted corridor to handle the water that it's going to come. And when you're talking about the storm surges, again, it's not just this outfall. Every outfall is going to be impacted. So as the outfall will be have tide gates, so it's not going to allow the East River water coming in and flooding the upland areas because of the tide gates. But the longer the surge lasts and if the tide gate remains closed for a long time, and there's still upstream water coming down, then there will be some residual flooding or associated flooding with that. But the corridor is designed for a 5-year rainfall event, just like all of the other city projects.
So like what we saw when the Deegan flooded, I guess it was almost 2 years ago now, was that the water goes into the weir and goes into the sewer, and so then the sewer couldn't get out fast enough, and so then the lake backed up, and when the lake backed up, it flooded the Deegan at 238 and 231st in the low-lying portions. With this, right? Is that correct? That kind of roughly right?
I think that the what happened 2 years ago, it's not that the sewer backed up and backed into the lake. It's the water that was coming from the
coming down, couldn't go any, couldn't go out.
Coming down. Right. That's what so the source of water is upstream. It's not that the Harlem River was backed up and it was back flowing that way. So
no, I didn't mean to. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply that. I meant that within the Tibbetts watershed, the water's coming down. That the water was coming down into Van Cortlandt Lake, and that it was going into the weir. And then once the sewer was at capacity, then the lake flooded and over, like the lake flooded into Van Cortlandt Park and the Golf House and over 238. My concern with this, and I still love this project. I love this project, but that if the water is, instead of going into the sewer, which was underground and kind of kept it, that the water is going down this corridor of the Deegan, when it stops to 25th because it can't go any further because the floodgate is closed, right? The tidal gate is closed because of the storm, that the water is now going to build up, get back, like all of the Tibbetts Greenway will, or all the Tibbetts watershed will kind of get funneled into this corridor. And just how are you going to channel that? How are you going to contain that?
So again, our strategy here is that we are only daylighting a portion of the flow from Van Cortlandt Lake. The Broadway sewer is still going to be active and available to take the excess flows. So if the load from the upstream areas exceeds the capacity of both the Broadway sewer and the supplemental these incremental capacity we're giving in the daylighted stream, then the same issues emerge. Like the solution to this is really doing things upstream and holding the water there, not once it's already at you. Because again, there's only, as you know, the corridor is very narrow and it's got multiple uses. There's a limited capacity. So to me, this is more like a daylighting project than a total flood control project. The flood control has to happen upstream. It will provide some benefits, incremental benefits, but it's not 100% solution for at least what you're projecting on that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Camelia, you had another question?
Yes, sorry, and thank you. First, just let me reiterate what Deb said in terms of we all absolutely love this project. Probably this is why we are so kind of overly concerned in some aspects. But I just wanted to bring to your attention and Sandeep's attention the issue of existing plans of ongoing development on Broadway. In land use, we have discussed the best part of this year, a very large project that will happen on the former visitation site. I think 360 something apartments. They will demolish what is now there, the former building of the church, and a school will be built also. So all this will add pressure on the capacity, on the sewer capacity. Just last week, we received another inquiry of a potential future rezoning on a site that is right next to the garage. I think it's called Riverdale Garage. It's right a little bit north of 231st, probably between 231st to 32nd, a site that I personally saw 3 years ago flooded with, or the garage is slightly at lower level. I mean, up to waist. It looked literally like a swimming pool. So all these, and they are proposing, I think, 120 something apartments. So I guess what I'm bringing to your attention is that whatever capacity is now, it will receive additional pressure from future buildings that will be built exactly, and both of them immediately adjacent to the site. I don't know how to say. I just wanted you to know, and if you have any comments as to future impact. I do agree with what Sandeep said as far as this being more of a daylighting and kind of recreation project than sewer capacity and flooding mitigation. But please keep in mind these things, that there are big buildings coming up immediately adjacent to this corridor in my land use, with my land use head. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I think we can wrap up our meeting. I think what I'll do is, just for anybody that's going to be joining us on Thursday, I can send out an email to everybody tomorrow with the information on the meeting location and time, just so everybody has that. So I'll send that out tomorrow to everybody with some more information. And I think this is good. And I will also make sure to get this recording up ASAP to our website, and I'll let you guys know once that's up as well, if you want to share. Okay.
Could you also just send the deck so we could print it out so we have it when we're with you? That would be great.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will.
Copies.
Well, we will bring the presentation that Rupesh did.
Yeah, I'll have some copies of the last few slides walking through the corridor. We'll bring those on Thursday.
Hi,
Wonderful.
I'm sorry, it's Laura.
Oh, hey, Laura.
I was trying to raise my hand before I had a little problem. I want to welcome your team to the May 24th meeting at Bronx Community Board 8 and welcome the public to join. I know that there'll be some tweaks between now and then. I want to reiterate what Camelia and some others have said about the wall and safety. You know, because of the cars and the volume, I wasn't clear on how tall it would be, and it seems it's going to be different in different places, but safety is a major concern. So you can expect some questions about the wall and how you will make that safe. That's all. I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That is on our calendar too. We're prepared for May. So thank you. Thank you everybody for joining. We so appreciate all your input and your feedback and all your great ideas for this project. We wouldn't be this far along without all of you. So thank you so much for joining. And I will be in touch tomorrow. Have a
Great.
good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.